something we'll have to think through. But I'll tell you one thing, we'll do that, but we'll do that when we finish fighting this immediate war, and we're far from out of the woods. So I think the time to try and figure out everything that happened was when we are finally beating back this disease once and for all in the here and now. Here and now, all our energy is going to go into fighting back the disease and saving lives.
Next question is Katie at the Wall Street Journal.
Hey, good morning. Happy Orthodox Easter to all who celebrate. My question is a quick two-part. I'm curious. I've heard from a lot of people who want to know, they've been in quarantine for more than a month. If they were sick, they've gotten better. But when can they see, not huge parties, but, when can someone go visit a grandparent or another member outside of their immediate family who they haven't been in quarantine with? I think a lot of people are confused as to, do they have to wait till the pause is lifted to go see an aunt, an uncle, or a grandparent, or can they do that in moderation?
Katie, thank you for the question, and I want to join with you in wishing a happy Orthodox Easter to all who celebrate it. I'm going to let the doctors speak to it. I will only say, both on the question of the test, as I understand it, on the blood drive, as I understand it, the focus is on people who have a confirmed positive test, but the doctors will speak to that. But in general, I would say, as they speak to the question of, folks coming out of quarantine and what kind of connection they can have with their family and all, just to remember what we said weeks and weeks ago about the dangers facing anyone and folks particularly have pre-existing conditions, if they're serious, severe conditions. And then when the two overlap, those folks are in tremendous danger, and there needs to be real caution while we're still in the heat of this crisis. Remember, we keep going over these daily indicators, Katie, pattern of progress yet. We've seen something better than what we were experiencing at the beginning of April, but we have not seen sustained progress. That means this disease is still out there, and those particularly vulnerable people have to be careful. But Dr. Barbeau, Dr. Katz, why don't you jump in?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would echo what you've said with regards to ensuring that we continue to protect the elderly, especially. One of the things that we have said since the beginning of this pandemic is that every day we learn new things about this virus. And the reality is that it wasn't until recently that we learned that people in the pre-symptomatic phase could transmit the virus. I think that it is yet to be determined how long someone can continue to shed virus. And so my recommendation would be that once someone has recovered from likely COVID-19, that they continue with the preventive recommendations that we have given with regards to diligent hand washing, continued use of face coverings, and maintaining that 6-foot distance from others. I think to the extent that family members do want to see one another in person, I would be very diligent about ensuring, again, that I limit visitors to elderly and that I put in place those 3 really crucial preventive measures to ensure that we continue protecting those that are at greatest risk.
Dr. Katz, you want to add on the plasma treatment or anything else?
Yes, on the plasma treatment, initially our focus is on people who are known positive. And the people who seem to make the most antibodies are people who have a major disease. People who have had a milder course don't seem to make as much in the way of antibodies. So that's part of why we're focusing on people with known infections. There may come a time when we're able to test other people as well, and some of them may turn out to have robust antibodies and therefore be plasma donors. But right now, we're focused on people with a known positive.
Next question is Todd at AM New York.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Hey, Todd, how are you?
I'm doing great. I have a question. Just actually last night, the police responded to a rap party video, whatever it is, and they issued 60 summonses and arrested 2 people for having guns. This was a huge gathering. I would love a comment from you, and maybe what message do you want to send? It was mostly young people. Yeah. So what message do we want to send to them?
Look, my message is, this is not business as usual. When you're partying in the middle of a pandemic, you're risking your life and the life of everyone around you. And I understand young people, I understand teenagers, I understand, everything that they feel and maybe the way they don't hear information the same way adults do. But you know what? This is different than anything we've lived through in our entire lives. The message has been given over and over again about how dangerous this situation is. So I say, I want to say thank you to all the officers who went out there and broke that up. By doing that, they're not only protecting those young people, but think about the parents, the aunts, uncles, the grandparents who are going to come in contact with those young people who need to be safe. And when people get together for a party, one young person could be picking up that disease from another young person and bringing it home where their older relatives could be endangered. So the police are absolutely doing the right thing to break it up. We're going to keep breaking those things up. If people need to get summonses to get the message, we'll do it. And remember also, in terms of the guns that they picked up, policing goes on. The fight always to protect public safety goes on. And, even though we have seen a lot of crime go down during this crisis, police still have to remain vigilant. So I particularly commend them for getting those 2 guns off the street.
Next question is Yoav at the city.
Mr. Mayor, I wanted to ask about the city's efforts for nursing homes. The volunteers that you mentioned for the 40-plus nursing homes, when are they going to start actually working there? On testing, the city is adding the 50,000 tests this week from ARIA. How many of those, if any, will be earmarked for nursing homes? And same question about securing PPE for nursing homes. Are there any efforts by the city currently? And if so, do you have any specific numbers on that? And just more broadly speaking...
Yoav, come on, man. You're doing a 16-part question. I got you on what you got here. Let's... In the interest of balance with your colleagues, that's a good set of questions right there. The nursing homes, that's going to move quickly with the folks coming in, the medical volunteers. We'll get you the exact timeline on that. Now, I'd say the whole picture with nursing homes. Look, the way we're looking at this crisis is it's all hands on deck. So the normal lines of authority here remain, meaning, let's just break it down. For example, in the hospital world, we run, of course, the city of New York runs health and hospitals, runs the 11 public hospitals. The voluntary hospitals, the independent hospitals are all regulated by the state of New York. Nursing homes are regulated by the state of New York. So in peacetime, there would be a very clear division of labor. But in this wartime dynamic, everyone is working together. The regulatory responsibilities, of course, remain. We're in charge of our public hospitals. The state's in charge of all the other hospitals and the nursing homes. But what we're doing is whenever there are those independent hospitals in particular need, they have a lot less resources than the voluntary hospitals, those bigger hospital systems do. When nursing homes are in need, we have made it a city priority to get them PPEs, to get them support. And now as we look at their staffing situation, they've gone through a lot. We made the decision to take some of our city medical volunteers and not just use them for our public hospitals, but use them for those independent hospitals and for the nursing homes as well. So we'll get you exact timelines on that. In terms of, so that's staffing, and that is, thank you, that is staffing. And that is also in terms of PPEs. The PPEs has been ongoing already where nursing homes have been getting regular supplies, and we can get you the details on the broad strokes of that. But the bottom line is nursing homes are supplied regularly from everything we take in. I have a note here telling me that a number of the medical volunteers have already gotten to the nursing homes, but we'll get you more detail on that. In protecting healthcare workers, protecting first responders. We're now expanding, as you know, to community-based testing in the communities hit hardest, with a focus on folks who are older and have pre-existing conditions, and testing for adult home workers and home healthcare workers and folks who go and directly are at the front line. A different way we're doing that in coordination with 1199 SCIU. So those test kits are being used in that manner. The more test kits we get in, plus the personnel to administer them, plus the PPEs to protect them, the deeper we want to go. So certainly nursing homes are one of the places we're going to be looking to do more with as we get more and more in, but we'll have details on that as we get to that point.
Next question is Kathleen from Patch.
Hi, Mr. Mayor and everyone. Given your concerns about the lack of federal funding, I'd like to know how many New Yorkers your office estimates will become food insecure this year, and how many of them you can feed if federal assistance doesn't come. And regarding the weather, how is the city preparing for blackouts, considering that, people aren't going to be able to go to the office or the movie theater to cool down and will probably be blasting their air conditioners at home?
That's a great question, Kathleen. I appreciate it. And we got a good question the other day about the question of heat waves, too, which the two go together. Obviously, when we see the heat waves is when we've had problems with our electricity supply. So we have a little time to prepare. Obviously, we are coming up with a plan of how to deal with heat waves in general. And obviously, we need to look at different models of how working with the state, where additional protections in place. But we got to make sure those are strong. I think you're right that a lot of people will be home using air conditioning as it gets hot. I think given that we expect the economy starts to come back in stages, I still imagine there's going to be a lot less use overall than if all the offices and all the businesses were, at full bore. But we need to model that. I think it's a great question of, what we expect when and how we stay ahead of it. We'll have more to say on that as it starts to get a little warmer. On the number of people food insecure, I'll come back to you with population estimates, but I can tell you one thing, the common sense answer is it's a hell of a lot of people and it's growing, because I share the projections that say we're somewhere along the line to about 500,000 New Yorkers either already unemployed or on the way to it. Even with some forms of support that are coming in, that's just a massive number of people who don't have or won't cause deeper and deeper food insecurity. So, Kathleen, a way to think about it, as I said, we now think in April we're going to provide about 10 million meals to New Yorkers. That number is going to probably go up to something like 15 million in May, just based on the increases we see in need and the number of calls coming in. But we'll get you a better estimate on, how many people we think are affected and where we think it's going.
Next question is Abu from Bangla Patrika.
Hello, Mr. Mayor. Did you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, how are you, Mr. Mayor?
Good, how you doing?
Thank you so much. My question is, since the corona situation happened, how many times you talked to President Trump? And since he said you were the worst mayor, what was the mood?
Great question. And I have spoken to the president somewhere between, I'd say, 8 and 10 times in the last month or so. Look, it is a complex dynamic. Obviously, we disagree fundamentally, across the board almost. But the first conversation we had was a very practical one about the immediate needs that New York City had. And that was at a point where, unfortunately, the crisis was growing by the day. And even with the profound differences we have, we were able in that moment to put them aside and just talk very specifically about where we would get ventilators, where we would get PPEs. I spoke to him a number of times about trying to get the military medical personnel in and how crucial that would be. And again, I will always say I have profound differences on what he's doing right now with the stimulus, where he's doing nothing. And I have profound differences with the way he mishandled the beginning of this, valued that. And I said it, I praised it many times because it was something we needed. But let's be clear, that was just to help us survive. Now we're talking about how do we fight back this disease and how do we restart our city, largest city in the nation, the linchpin of the American economy. How do we restart it? I've had this conversation with him and the vice president. I've appealed to them. I've gotten nothing back. No response, no public statement about the importance of the stimulus. I find it just unbelievable. I don't know what they think they will gain through their silence, both the president and vice president. If the president remains silent and the money to relieve America's cities and states doesn't come, he is guaranteeing that there will not be a recovery. It's as simple as that. You can't have a recovery if your state and local governments aren't functioning. And it just makes no sense. It makes no sense humanely, morally. It makes no sense for what he says is his priority. So the conversations have been unusual, I'll put it that way, because sometimes I see something I can make some sense of and sometimes I don't. But the strangest part to me is, I put the clearest need on the table, made it abundantly clear what it would mean to all of us in New York City, but to everyone around the country, and how it fit everything he said he believes in and wants to do, and I got no response whatsoever.
Next question is Roger at 1010 Wins.
Roger? Roger, are you out there?
We can come back to Roger. Next question is Sydney at Gothamist.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. This is Sydney with Gothamist. You've been updating us every day on these three specific indicators for a few days now, or a week or so. And they've been ticking up and down. Today, it was a mixed bag, like you said. The other day, they ticked all in the direction that they didn't.
Sydney, fantastic question, because this is what we're all asking ourselves. Is it a plateau, which would be really bad in my view, because that means, we're fighting this same kind of horrible Groundhog Day reality of a lot of people going through hell and our system pushed to the limit and the inability to really turn the corner and relax the restrictions. That's what a plateau means. Plateau is not a good word. I think it's too soon to tell. I think compared to where we were, look, just take the beginning of April. And you remember I talked about Sunday, April 5th. I went over this with so many people so many times during the days leading up to that. We thought we were about to really walk through the gates of hell. We thought we were about to go into a just horrendous situation. And at that point, it leveled off, and thank God it did. So the plus side of what you've been seeing now over the last 2 weeks or so with these indicators is that it is better than it was projected to be by a lot, and we have shown the ability to make progress, and it obviously, and social distancing and keeping those tight. What it does not yet tell us is this a sustained reality, a sort of up and down, different days, or can we turn the corner and get some momentum? Now, yesterday, again, we had a mixed bag, but 3 of the 4 indicators went in the right direction, and the one that went up only went up by a little bit. So we've had days like that are a little more hopeful. And I still remain convinced that if we do things the right way, we can create the momentum and start on the pathway to the next stage. But I think we have just too small a sample size right now. I think it's going to take more before we can get a real take on this. Either of our doctors want to comment on that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I want to build on what you've laid out to say that I think it's important for us to look at these measures, but I also want to remind New Yorkers that it's normal for us to see what I refer to as a sawtooth pattern, meaning that some days we'll see them go up, other days we'll see them go down. And the important thing is to look at them in the broader picture and what the trends have been. And so I think, for the last several days, perhaps a week and a half or so, we have been saying that we are seeing very encouraging news in terms of the various indicators that we follow and that we need New Yorkers to continue, though, adhering to social distancing. So I think the important thing here to note is that it's to be expected that we'll see daily fluctuations, but that broadly speaking, these do seem to be moving in the right direction, but it's too early to declare whether it's a plateau or whether we're seeing sustained reduction.
Thank you. Do we have Roger back or not?
Roger, are you with us?
Mayor,
Roger?
Mayor, can you hear me?
Can you hear me, Roger?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
I'd like to talk about Borough Park. There have been tweets suggesting that police have been cracking down on illegal gatherings in the Hasidic community, but they're not issuing summonses or making arrests. And the implication is that some are saying that they're not getting authorization to do that from you or from the top brass at the NYPD. No. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, sure, I can comment. That's bull. Let's put it politely. Roger, I've had this conversation with leaders of the Jewish community. I've had the conversation with Commissioner Shea and Chief Monahan. No, it's abundantly clear. There is a crackdown anywhere that people are ignoring the rules that have been put in place. You remember back at Passover, we talked about a very small number of individuals who were still trying to gather in the Jewish community. There was also some that were trying to gather in Christian communities. And we said that literally on right in the middle of the holidays that if people tried to gather, if they tried to go into their houses of worship, the NYPD would meet them there and turn them back. And if we had to lock the doors, we'd lock it. If we had to have the buildings department go in and deem the building a place that people could not occupy, we would do that, whatever it takes, including the fines and all. So no, that's just wrong. Anybody who's gathering is going to be dispersed, and if there needs to be violations, there absolutely will be. Arrests would be, of course, the very last resort. But right now, the job is this: stop people from gathering. If they need to be dispersed, disperse them. Don't hesitate to do it if that's what it takes.
Next is Reuven from the Post.
Reuven, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to see if you could weigh in, please. Some members of the city council are urging the governor to shut down subways to stop the spread, of course, and I wanted to see if I could get your take on that.
Look, I respect, obviously, that that's a decision the state has to make, the governor has to make. They run the MTA. But I would say so far, the biggest challenge that would create would be for our frontline healthcare workers, first responders, essential workers. I don't know a truly effective way they could get around. I've heard different ideas thrown out there, but I don't know how it would work, honestly. And we can't have those people in a position where they can't get to work. Most New Yorkers don't have a car. So I'm dubious about whether there is any alternative, honestly. And obviously, with the subways, the ridership is down greatly. So we need tight social distancing standards. And I think the MTA needs to do a better job of defining really clearly what's the maximum number of people that should be on a subway car and ensuring with the NYPD there's never more than that number on a subway car. But I think the real question here is if we continue to limit the number of non-essential workers, the subway should be able to function in a way that still allows for social distancing. And they are still the best way, and the buses, of course, for people to get around. As we start to increase over time, we got to make sure that people can remain safe. So that's where I think it gets more complex. But, you know, I have trouble understanding any proposal unless we can prove that there's another way for people to get around that actually works, the people we need the most. If they can't get to where we need them, that poses a threat to everyone.
Next, we have Janin from Cranes.
Say the name again.
Hi, Mr. Mayor.
Janin Fisher from Cranes.
Okay, hey.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. Janin Fisher here. This week, the business community has given some dire prognostications about the economic forecast of the city. Your plan seems to lean heavily on federal aid and cutting city services. All indications that federal aid may not come. What is your plan B?
Janan, I don't start with the assumption the federal aid won't come. I appreciate one could see it that way, but I don't see it that way. I'll tell you why, because I think there's a logic here. I never would accuse folks in Washington, D.C. of being logical normally, but I think there's an aid to cities and states. There will not be an economic recovery, period. It literally cannot work. If cities and states cannot provide basic services, you will not have an environment where the economy can restart. You'll have huge numbers of people out of work. It will not work. And I think the sheer pragmatic reality will sooner rather than later become clear and overcome the ideology. The only thing standing in the way here is ideology, a Republican ideology that somehow does not want to support state and local governments that are holding the line right now and saving lives. And it makes no sense against the backdrop of this crisis. I think what you're going to see, Janan, is more and more members of the business community speaking up because they're practical. They know if their city and state governments can't function and there aren't basic services, they won't be able to sustain their businesses. So, no, I do think eventually the hand of President Trump and Leader McConnell will be forced. Now, it shouldn't have to be forced. They should do this because it's the right thing to do. If they could give $58 billion to the airline industry, they could certainly do more for the nation's largest city to get us back on our feet. We're the economic leader of the country. Again, President was able to lead the way to $1.5 trillion in tax cuts for the wealthy and corporations a couple of years ago. Of course he could make this happen. So I don't think it's right to say that's unlikely. I think it has to happen, or the results will be just fundamentally horrible for people, horrible for working people, but they also will set back a recovery deeply.
We have time for two more. Next question is Deborah Lee from the Manhattan Times.
Hey, good morning, everyone. How are you?
Good morning.
I wanted to ask Mr. Mayor about earlier this week when you unveiled, a really sobering municipal budget, and you described it at the time as wartime. Even in years of more robust revenues and projections, the shortfalls that exist are really taken up by nonprofits across the city, and they're addressing the very areas that we're looking to focus on now: shelter, food, health. What is the guidance really at this point, given that some of them are really teetering on the precipice of extinction and have some real concerns about how they're going to, move forward from this time? I mean, many of them are really, really beginning to falter. And the second question I have is about the field hospital in the Bronx. I know that the federal government is in charge, but there's no field hospital in the borough at all for the borough that's been, most impacted. And your thoughts on that?
Well, Deborah Lee, on that point, look, the entire reality of the field hospitals changed in a matter of days. Again, if you go back to Sunday, April 5th, everyone, and I will say this was actually a case of real coordination and common cause, federal government, state government, city government, everyone was on the same page, massive expansion in field hospital capacity. We were going to turn a vast number of hotels into field hospitals. I mean, everyone was on the same page that the numbers were terrifying and suggested a need for a massive number of beds, huge number more ICU beds, a huge number of beds for people convalescing from COVID. And then things changed and they leveled off substantially. So the question to me now is, what are the needs of the people in the Bronx in terms of hospital beds? Dr. Katz can speak to this in a moment, but the question is, have our hospitals, all of which were expanding, remember, Deborah Lee, every hospital is under obligation to expand bed capacity. Have they been able to sustain the needs of the people of the Bronx within the existing hospitals? And if we see anything that suggests we need additional capacity, we can turn it right back on. But my sense is what happened is when things leveled off, the hospitals were able to pick up a lot more slack than originally intended. So let me have Dr. Katz jump in there, and then I'll speak to the nonprofit issue.
You're correct, sir. Our 3 Bronx hospitals Lincoln, Jacoby, and NCB have already peaked in terms of their census and are actually have fewer patients now.
Thank you, Doctor. On the nonprofits, Deborah Lee, you're asking a really powerful question. This city has the strongest nonprofit network, community-based organization network, any place in this country by far. It is one of the reasons we succeed in protecting people and protecting their health as well as we do, and protecting young people, supporting young people. There's so many things that we rely on the nonprofits for. I think you're making a powerful point. Every nonprofit is feeling tremendous strain. Some of the bigger, stronger ones are going to come through. There's a lot of smaller ones and community-based ones that are going to go through a much deeper crisis. Today, we can only do a modest amount to help because everybody's in this state of sort of suspended animation, trying to figure out where we're going with this crisis and when we're going to be able to do a physical work again and have our, society and economy get back to something more normal. But I think the question going forward is, once we have a picture where we're going, once we see what kind of support we're getting from the federal government, et cetera, what can we do to protect those community-based nonprofits? I think it's a really important priority. But I can't give you a game plan yet because we're still not out of the woods with the immediate crisis. I can tell you it's something we're going to talk about overtly in our budget process looking to June, because someday things are going to get back to normal and we're going to be depending on them. I mean, I'll give you a small example, but I was just in Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn, in the campaign against hunger, a really community-based organization. This one, of course, dealing with food in the middle of a food crisis, so their work is particularly pertinent to the moment. But if they had not already been there and been a strong community-based organization, it would be a lot harder right now for us to get food to people who need it. In that part of Brooklyn. So I think that's an object lesson of why we need the nonprofits to survive this crisis, and we'll do everything we can to help them do that.
Last question for today goes to Jacob from Jewish Insider.
Jacob? Let's try again. Jacob, can you hear me, Jacob?
You hear me now?
Yeah.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. Good morning. I was very encouraged to hear your comments about enforcement, but I just wanted to detail a complaint that I myself had reported on Friday on a specific location that was open over the holidays and also on the Sabbath. Police actually came down. They were there for 15 minutes, but they were clueless. They didn't even know that there's such a restriction against opening such locations, and they didn't disperse the crowd. It was an hour before Sabbath came in, an hour before the services were to be conducted, and the entire Sabbath, which is Friday night, Sabbath morning, and in the evening, there were over 40 people in that specific location. I cannot confirm about other locations, but although I know a majority of shuls were officially closed, I know from people who have confirmed to me that some shuls were open and have been open over the past few weeks. So when you talk about enforcement, can you clarify, first of all, what kind of enforcement and how will you, as the mayor of New York City, in order to save lives, make sure that these are not just warnings, these are not just fines, but these things do not keep on happening? Because I have witnessed my own complaint and have seen the NYPD not do the enforcement that you are speaking about, but also people are not necessarily taking pictures and sending it to 311.
Right. So Jacob, stay on the line. Let's keep that line open with Jacob. Thank you, Jacob, for reporting this. First of all, the location where you say the police went and did not disperse, where is that, please?
That's on 43rd Street in Brooklyn.
Okay, can we get an exact location?
Yes, 1321 43rd Street.
Okay, so I want to thank you for that report. We're going to deal with, I'll talk to Commissioner Shea right after this. I will order that there be police there and waiting for the next Shabbos to ensure that no one gathers and to watch throughout Shabbos to make sure there is no gathering. And I'd like to ask of you, if you have any other locations you've heard about, please give them to our team here at City Hall. Any details, and I want to say this to all our colleagues in the media, but also to all New Yorkers. This is why I'm asking people to call 311 or to send those photos in. But I need specificity. I need to know the location. I need to know the time and what people saw. Obviously, a photo, says it all, or a description of what you saw. It's unacceptable, Jacob, for people to gather. And as you said, the vast majority of shuls have closed. Across the board, the rabbinical leadership has worked with us to tell people do not gather. We've seen tremendous adherence. There are clearly still some who are violating, and we will be very harsh about that. So it goes like this. We're going to have police there to not allow people to gather. If someone gathers that we didn't hear about, we'll go break it up, send people home. If people need violations, up to $1,000 per person, we will do that. Again, we don't want to do arrests unless someone is absolutely refusing police instructions, then arrest is an option as well. But we have been over this and over this. So all we got to do now is know the locations. Commissioner Shea has been abundantly clear that there will be full enforcement. And anyone who gives me a location, I will make sure the police are there. And if for any reason the police don't follow through, then that precinct commander will be in trouble. It's as simple as that. This is a crisis. This is about saving lives. So this is real serious stuff. So let's be really clear. It's going to be super easy to tell who's doing their job and not doing their job. Just give me the places and the times, and we will do the rest. Jacob, thank you. Really appreciate that. Keep that information coming in, and everyone else. And again, that's a good note as we wrap up here. Look, again, I don't like the notion that we're going to have New Yorkers calling in reports like that. I don't like it. I don't think anyone likes it. No one wants to do it. No one wants to see someone get a $1,000 fine. No one wants to see this kind of enforcement action have to happen, but it does have to happen. And this is what I keep coming back to. If you don't like this crisis and what it's doing to us, you got to actually do something about it. Now, the vast majority of New Yorkers are, and I say thank you. I really do. You've been amazing. The folks who still don't get it are going to have to pay a price. And so, please, help us do what is right and what is just. If you see it, call it in, send the photo in so we can do something about it. Anyone who's ignoring these instructions is putting other people's lives in danger. And, I would say to people across all communities, every part of the city, all families, all cultures, every neighborhood, people love our elders. We respect our elders. If we don't follow these rules, you know who's going to suffer? Folks in their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Those are the people we are supposed to love and honor, but if we don't follow these rules, we're putting them in danger. So when you call 311, when you send a photo, you're actually protecting people. You're particularly protecting our elders. You're protecting our healthcare workers. We need to do it. And then it is our job in the city. It is the job of the NYPD. It's the job of all our enforcement agencies to follow through and show people there are real consequences, because that's how we'll save lives. With that, everyone, again, it's a beautiful spring day. Enjoy it a little bit, and then get on back home, and let's protect each other. Thanks so much.
you.